The walls that Henrik Johansson built on his Montana cabin in 1922 looked like someone had decided that the space between wall layers was the perfect place to store several tons of charcoal for absolutely no reason. While every other homesteader and trapper in the Tobacco Root Mountains had constructed standard double-wall cabins with sawdust, moss, or newspaper as insulation between the inner and outer walls, Henrik had filled his wall cavities entirely with crushed charcoal, not coal, not ash, pure wood charcoal, broken into pieces ranging from marble-sized to fist-sized, packed tightly into the 8-inch gap between his inner and outer log walls. From outside, the cabin looked normal. From inside, if you pulled away a piece of chinking, you'd see nothing but black charcoal filling the entire wall cavity. It looked like he'd imported darkness and stuffed it into his walls. "You've filled your walls with charcoal," said Robert Morrison, Henrik's neighbor, whose cabin stood on a ridge 3/4 of a mile to the north. "Not sawdust, not moss. Charcoal. Henrik, charcoal is fuel. You burn it. You don't stuff it in walls. This makes no sense whatsoever." Henrik was finishing the last section of his north wall, carefully pouring crushed charcoal into the cavity through a temporary opening at the top. The charcoal settled and compacted as he added more. Charcoal is the best insulation material that exists, better than sawdust, better than moss, better than anything you can buy, and I have unlimited supply from my charcoal pit. Free insulation that's better than anything expensive. Charcoal is black. Black absorbs heat. Everyone knows that. You've filled your walls with a material that will absorb cold from outside and make your cabin colder. This is backwards thinking. Charcoal being black doesn't matter when it's trapped inside a wall cavity. No light reaches it. The color is irrelevant. What matters is the structure. Charcoal is mostly air. Maybe 80% air by volume. Tiny air pockets throughout. Air is the best insulator. Charcoal is a matrix of trapped air, perfect insulation. Air pockets. Trapped air. You sound like you're trying to convince yourself this isn't a terrible idea. When winter comes and you're freezing because your walls are filled with cold-absorbing black rocks, don't come to my cabin asking to share my fire. When winter comes, my cabin will be 40 degrees warmer than yours, maybe more, using half the wood you burn, and the charcoal walls will keep that warmth in all season long without degrading or settling or rotting like your sawdust does. 40 degrees warmer. Henrik, that's impossible. We'll have similar stoves, similar cabins, similar wood supply. You can't be 40 degrees warmer just because you filled your walls with charcoal instead of sawdust. The charcoal has at least 3 times better insulation value than sawdust. Maybe 4 times. My walls will resist heat loss far better than yours. The charcoal also manages moisture perfectly, absorbs and releases it without degrading, creates stable insulation year-round. Sawdust gets damp and compresses and loses effectiveness. Charcoal doesn't. It's superior in every way. Robert shook his head. "I think you've spent too much time breathing charcoal fumes from your pit. Your thinking is affected, but I'll check on you after the first big cold snap. When you're shivering, I'll help you dig out the charcoal and fill the walls with proper insulation. I won't need help. The charcoal will prove itself." Other neighbors had similar reactions. The consensus was absolute. Henrik had made a bizarre mistake. Charcoal belonged in stoves and forges, not in walls. Using it as insulation was backwards logic from someone who didn't understand building science. Some thought Henrik was being cheap. He made charcoal for sale. He had tons of it. Using it in his walls meant he didn't have to buy proper insulation. But being cheap with insulation would cost him dearly in heating fuel. Others thought he was experimenting, testing an idea that would fail but teach him lessons. A few thought he'd genuinely lost his grip on reality. Henrik ignored all of it. He'd spent 5 years making charcoal professionally. He understood charcoal properties better than anyone in Montana. He knew that charcoal was extraordinarily porous. A single piece of hardwood charcoal had more internal surface area than seemed possible. millions of tiny air pockets created during the carbonization process. These pockets were sealed. Air couldn't circulate between them. Each pocket was a tiny dead air space. Trapped air was the best insulation known. Charcoal was essentially a solid foam, a three-dimensional matrix of trapped air pockets held together by carbon structure. The R value of charcoal was approximately 3 to 4 per inch, far better than wood at 1.25 per inch, better than sawdust at 2 to 2.5 per inch, better than most natural materials. His walls were double-layer construction. Inner wall of 8-inch logs, 8-inch cavity filled with charcoal. Outer wall of 6-inch logs. Total wall thickness of 22 inches. The inner and outer walls were structurally independent. Vertical posts supported both. The cavity between them was completely filled with charcoal from ground level to ceiling. No gaps, no voids. Solid charcoal insulation throughout. Henrik had produced the charcoal specifically for this purpose. He'd burned primarily aspen and willow. These woods created lightweight, highly porous charcoal. He'd controlled the burn carefully to maximize porosity. The result was charcoal that was perhaps 15% carbon and 85% air by volume. Incredibly light, incredibly insulating. He'd crushed the charcoal into pieces ranging from 1 inch to 4 inches. This size range allowed tight packing. Small pieces filled gaps between large pieces. The result was minimal settling and maximum density while maintaining the air pocket structure. The total amount of charcoal in the walls was approximately 4,000 pounds, 2 tons. The cavity volume was roughly 1,000 cubic feet. At 4 pounds per cubic foot, 4,000 pounds filled the space. The cost was zero. Henrik produced charcoal. Using it in his walls meant foregoing sales, but the value as insulation far exceeded the sales value as fuel. The construction had taken most of the summer and fall of 1922. Building double walls was labor-intensive, creating proper structural support, ensuring alignment, leaving openings at the top for filling the cavity, then producing the charcoal, then crushing it to appropriate sizes, then filling the cavities section by section, then sealing the fill openings. The total construction time was approximately 4 months working alone. But Henrik was convinced the investment would pay off dramatically. The first test came in early November when temperatures dropped to 25 degrees Fahrenheit. Henrik fired his modest wood stove. He wasn't trying to heat aggressively, just maintaining comfortable temperature. Within 2 hours, his cabin was at 70 degrees. He let the fire burn down and monitored temperature drop. Over the next 8 hours, the cabin temperature fell only 6 degrees. From 70 to 64 degrees. In a conventional cabin, the temperature would have dropped 20 to 25 degrees over the same period. The charcoal walls were holding heat extraordinarily well. Robert Morrison visited in mid-November. "How's the charcoal wall cabin?" "Exceeding expectations. The heat retention is remarkable. Want to compare temperatures?" They both checked thermometers. Robert's cabin was at 57 degrees with a fire that had burned out 2 hours ago. Outside temperature was 35 degrees, 22-degree differential. Henrik's cabin was at 68 degrees with a fire that had burned out 4 hours ago. Outside temperature was 35 degrees, 33-degree differential, and Henrik's fire had been out twice as long. Robert was skeptical. "Your cabin is newer, tighter construction, better chinking. The walls aren't the only factor." "My construction methods are standard, same as everyone uses. The only difference is the charcoal insulation, and my cabin is 11 degrees warmer than yours, with no fire for 4 hours versus your 2 hours. That's entirely the charcoal." "It's mild weather, early season. Real cold will tell the truth. Real cold will prove the charcoal even more effective." December brought colder temperatures. Henrik's cabin continued outperforming. With 1 fire per day, he maintained 65 to 72-degree temperatures. At night, the temperature dropped only 8 to 12 degrees despite no active heating. The thermal retention was spectacular. Robert was burning wood twice daily and barely maintaining 60 to 64-degree temperatures. His cabin lost heat rapidly when the fire died. He was starting to suspect Henrik might be right about the charcoal. January 1923 brought extreme cold to Montana. On January 8th, the temperature dropped to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. On January 9th, minus 28 degrees. On January 10th, minus 35 degrees. On January 11th, minus 42 degrees. The cold settled in and held. For 9 days, the temperature never rose above minus 15 degrees. It was some of the coldest weather Montana had experienced in decades. Wood stoves across the region burned constantly. People fed them every 2 to 3 hours around the clock. Cabins struggled to maintain 50-degree temperatures. The cold was overwhelming. Robert was burning 2 full cords of wood per week. 2 cords. And his cabin was averaging 46 to 50 degrees. He wore every piece of clothing he owned indoors. He slept under piles of blankets. He was constantly, miserably cold. On January 13th, 4 days into the extreme cold, Robert made the difficult trek through waist-deep snow to Henrik's cabin. He was worried about his neighbor, and he wanted to see whether the charcoal walls were working or whether Henrik was frozen solid. He arrived and knocked on the door. Henrik opened it immediately, wearing a light cotton shirt. No coat, no hat, not even a wool sweater, just a thin shirt. "Robert, come in quickly. Close the door." Robert stepped inside and the warmth hit him like a physical force. It was genuinely warm, comfortably, actually warm. He stood there stunned, letting the heat soak into his frozen body. "What's your cabin temperature?" Robert asked, though he already knew it had to be dramatically warmer than his own. Henrik gestured to the thermometer. 90 degrees. 90? 90 degrees. Outside is minus 42. That's a 132-degree temperature difference. Henrik, that's impossible. No cabin can maintain that differential. The charcoal walls, they're creating a thermal barrier that almost nothing can penetrate. Heat can't escape. I fire my stove twice a day, morning and evening, 4 hours each, firing. The cabin stays warm continuously. It never drops below 85 degrees even overnight with no fire. My cabin is 47 degrees, yours is 90 degrees, that's 43 degrees warmer. No, 44 degrees, with the same stove, the same wood source, just different wall insulation. The charcoal is providing a 44-degree advantage. Not just the charcoal alone, but yes, primarily the charcoal. The R value of my walls is probably 60 to 70 total. Your sawdust-insulated walls are maybe R15 to 20 total. My walls are 3 to 4 times more resistant to heat flow. The heat I produce stays inside. The cold outside stays outside. The charcoal creates a thermal boundary that's extraordinarily effective. How much wood are you burning? About 1/3 of a cord per week, even in this extreme cold. Less than 1/6 of what you're burning. Robert sat down heavily. He was exhausted from constant fire tending, sleep-deprived from waking every 2 hours, mentally defeated by the unrelenting cold. And here was Henrik, comfortable in a light shirt, sleeping through nights, burning minimal wood. The difference was staggering. I need to understand how charcoal can insulate this well. It seems impossible. The structure. Charcoal is created by heating wood in the absence of oxygen. The volatile compounds drive off as smoke and gases. What remains is pure carbon in a matrix that replicates the wood's cellular structure. Trees have millions of cells. Each cell becomes a tiny air pocket in the charcoal. The cell walls are carbon, incredibly thin carbon walls. Between every wall is trapped air. It's like having millions of tiny insulated chambers throughout the material. Air can't circulate between them. Each pocket is dead air. Dead air has R value of about 4 to 5 per inch. My charcoal with 85% air content has effective R value of about 3.5 per inch. 8 inches of charcoal gives R value of 28 just for the insulation. Add the 2 log walls, and total system R value is 60 to 70. Your sawdust compresses and allows some air circulation. R value may be 2 per inch. 8 inches gives R 16. Add your walls, and you're at R 20 maybe. My walls are 3 times more insulating than yours. Can charcoal be added to existing walls? If you can access the wall cavity, yes. Drill holes at the top, pour in crushed charcoal, it will settle and fill, seal the holes. Your insulation improves immediately. I'm doing that tomorrow. Tonight if I can see to work. I can't continue like this. The story spread through the Tobacco Root Mountains with astonishing speed. The Norwegian charcoal maker with the black walls. His cabin stayed at 90 degrees in minus 42-degree weather. He used 1/6 the wood everyone else used. He'd proven that charcoal was revolutionary insulation. People wanted to know more. They wanted to see it. They wanted charcoal for their own walls. Henrik welcomed visitors throughout the rest of January. He showed them his wall construction. He explained the charcoal properties, porosity, cell structure, trapped air, R values, moisture management. Not everyone understood the technical details, but everyone understood 90 degrees versus 47 degrees, 44-degree advantage, 1/6. The wood consumption. Sleeping through the night. These benefits were undeniable and transformative. By February, 16 families had purchased crushed charcoal from Henrik to add to their existing wall cavities. The installation was straightforward. Drill holes, pour charcoal, seal holes. Simple. The results were immediate and consistent. Every cabin that added charcoal insulation reported dramatic improvements. Interior. Temperatures increased by 20 to 35 degrees. Wood consumption dropped by 50 to 70%. Comfort improved enormously. The validation was complete and overwhelming. If you're starting to see that the best insulation isn't modern materials, but understanding natural structures, that charcoal isn't just fuel but an engineering marvel, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. We're uncovering solutions that outperform anything you can buy. Hit that subscribe button and join us in learning what actually works. Now let's look at the science behind why Henrik's charcoal walls were so effective. The physics of charcoal as insulation involves understanding its structure and properties at multiple scales. First, the cellular structure of wood and charcoal. Wood is composed of millions of tiny cells. These cells are elongated tubes, aligned with the grain. The cell walls are made of cellulose, lignin, and other organic compounds. The cells are filled with water and air when the wood is alive. When wood is heated in a low-oxygen environment, it undergoes pyrolysis. The organic compounds decompose and release as gases and vapors. What remains is carbon replicating the original cell structure. The carbon walls are incredibly thin, perhaps a few micrometers. The cell spaces remain. Each cell space becomes a tiny air pocket, a sealed chamber. In a piece of charcoal the size of your fist, there are millions of these air pockets. The total volume of air spaces is 80 to 90% of the charcoal volume. Only 10 to 20% is carbon structure. Charcoal is essentially solidified air held in a carbon matrix. Second, thermal conductivity of air versus carbon. Air is an excellent insulator when it can't move. Still air has thermal conductivity of about 0.024 watts per meter Kelvin. Very low. Heat transfers through it very slowly. Carbon has thermal conductivity of about 1 to 2 watts per meter Kelvin, much higher than air, but in charcoal, the carbon is only 10 to 20% of the structure. The effective thermal conductivity of charcoal is dominated by the air component. The carbon provides structural support. The air provides insulation. The result is material with effective thermal conductivity of about 0.05 to 0.07 watts per meter Kelvin. Similar to modern foam insulations, the R value is approximately 3 to 4 per inch. Henrik's 8 inches of charcoal provided R25 to R32 just for the charcoal layer. Third, the prevention of convection. In loose fill insulation like sawdust, air can circulate between particles if the particles are large or if there are gaps. This air circulation carries heat by convection, reduces insulation value. Charcoal particles contain the air inside sealed cells. Air can't circulate between cells. Between particles, the contact points and interstitial spaces are small enough that air circulation is minimal. The charcoal acts like closed-cell foam. No convection. Maximum insulation. Fourth, moisture management. Charcoal is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from air. But unlike sawdust or wood, which rot when damp, charcoal is inert. It doesn't rot, doesn't mold, doesn't degrade. Charcoal in the wall cavity would absorb moisture vapor from inside the cabin, hold it temporarily, release it when humidity dropped. This moisture buffering maintained the air pockets in dry condition. Dry air insulates better than humid air. The charcoal actively managed its own effectiveness. Fifth, thermal mass contribution. 4,000 pounds of charcoal had some thermal mass. Not enormous, but meaningful. Charcoal has specific heat capacity of about 0.2 BTU per pound per degree Fahrenheit. 4,000 pounds heated by 50 degrees stored about 40,000 BTUs. This buffered temperature swings and extended heating between fires. The mathematical analysis shows the efficiency advantage clearly. Heat loss through a wall. Q equals U times A times delta T. U is overall heat transfer coefficient. Lower U means less heat loss. U is the inverse of total R value. Henrik's walls, R65 total. U equals 0.015. Robert's walls, R20 total. U equals 0.05. Henrik's walls had U value 3.3 times lower than Robert's. For the same temperature difference, Henrik lost about 1/3 as much heat through his walls as Robert lost through his walls. Walls account for perhaps 40% of total cabin heat loss. Reducing wall heat loss by 67% reduces total heat loss by approximately 27%. But Henrik's cabin also had better roof insulation and better floor insulation than average. His total system was very efficient. Combined effect was that Henrik's cabin lost perhaps 40% as much total heat as Robert's cabin. This explained the dramatic difference in wood consumption. 60% less heat loss meant 60% less heating required. Henrik used 1/3 the wood. Actually better than the heat loss reduction would predict. The extra efficiency came from better combustion, thermal mass effects, and Henrik's careful fire management. The 44-degree temperature difference was the result of efficiency compounding. With similar heating input, Henrik's cabin accumulated heat. Robert's cabin lost heat as fast as it was produced. At steady state, temperatures stabilized. Henrik at 85 to 90 degrees. Robert at 46 to 50 degrees. The difference was entirely insulation effectiveness. The comfort comparison was dramatic. Robert's cabin at 47 degrees was uninhabitable. You couldn't function normally. Constant shivering, dangerous cold, risk of frostbite indoors. Henrik's cabin at 90 degrees was actually too warm for some activities. He sometimes opened a window briefly to cool down. Normal clothing, normal activities, complete comfort. The psychological difference was life-changing. Robert was in survival mode. Constant vigilance, constant work, constant fear of the fire going out. Henrik was in comfort mode, normal sleep, normal routine, no anxiety. The mental health impact was substantial. The construction cost comparison was interesting. Robert's cabin walls with sawdust insulation, approximately $150 in materials and labor. Henrik's cabin walls with charcoal insulation, approximately $160 in materials and labor. $10 difference. The charcoal itself was free to Henrik since he produced it. But even if purchased, charcoal cost about the same as sawdust. The performance difference was enormous for essentially the same cost. just a matter of choosing the better material. The durability was exceptional. Sawdust in wall cavities settles over time, compresses, loses effectiveness, eventually rots if moisture gets in. Typical lifespan may be 10 to 15 years before needing replacement. Charcoal doesn't settle much, doesn't compress significantly, doesn't rot, ever. It's chemically stable, inert. Henrik's charcoal walls operated from 1922 to 1957, 35 years. When the cabin was finally dismantled, the charcoal was examined. Still dry, still intact, still providing full insulation value. No degradation, zero maintenance over 35 years. Perfect performance throughout. By spring 1923, 30 cabins in the region had added charcoal insulation to their walls. By 1925, over 60. The technique spread throughout Montana and into Idaho and Wyoming. The implementation varied. Some people filled entire wall cavities like Henrik. Others added charcoal to attics. Some used it under floors. All applications showed dramatic improvements. Charcoal insulation became standard practice among people who valued efficiency. The technology never went fully mainstream for predictable reasons. Most people didn't have access to cheap charcoal. Buying it specifically for insulation was expensive in some regions. The black color made people nervous, even though color was irrelevant inside wall cavities. Cultural resistance. Charcoal was fuel, not insulation. Using it in walls seemed wrong. But among mountain people, trappers, and homesteaders who understood the properties and had access to charcoal, it became the insulation of choice. Modern building science has validated charcoal's effectiveness. Activated charcoal, which is even more porous than regular charcoal, is used in some high-end insulation systems. The principle is the same: cellular structure, trapped air, low thermal conductivity. Research papers document R values for charcoal of 3 to 4 per inch, exactly what Henrik claimed. Studies on moisture management show charcoal's superior performance. It doesn't degrade, it buffers humidity. It maintains effectiveness indefinitely. Everything Henrik understood through experience has been confirmed by science. Henrik Johansson lived in his Montana cabin from 1922 to 1957, 35 years. During that entire time, he benefited from his charcoal walls, always warmer than neighbors, always using less wood, always comfortable. In 1957, Henrik moved to Helena to live with his son's family. He was 81 years old. The cabin remained in the family and was used as a summer retreat for another 20 years. When it was finally taken apart in 1977, the charcoal from the walls was examined by a materials researcher from Montana State University. The researcher published a paper documenting the charcoal's properties and condition. Perfect preservation. Full insulation value maintained. The paper concluded that charcoal was an underutilized, highly effective, and remarkably durable insulation material. That paper is one of the few academic references to Henrik's innovation. Before we finish, I need you to understand something crucial. If you're seeing that natural materials, engineered by understanding their properties, outperform expensive modern insulation, that a waste product from one process can be the perfect solution for another, then subscribe to this channel right now. We're preserving knowledge that the modern world has forgotten. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you're learning what truly matters. Now let's wrap up with the lessons from Henrik's charcoal wall. The story of Henrik's charcoal wall teaches several profound lessons about materials, insulation, and innovation. First, properties matter more than categories. Charcoal is categorized as fuel. Burning it releases energy. That's its primary use. But charcoal also has extraordinary insulation properties: structure, porosity, moisture resistance. These properties make it excellent insulation regardless of its category. If we only think of materials in narrow categories, we miss opportunities. Understanding properties lets us use materials in multiple ways. Second, Natural structures often outperform engineered structures. Wood cells are optimized by evolution. Millions of years of selection created structures that work. When we carbonize wood, we preserve that cellular structure while removing everything else. The result is pure optimized structure, better than most human designs. Nature has solved problems we're still working on. Study natural structures. Learn from them. Third, free or waste materials can be the best solutions. Henrik produced charcoal commercially. The process created various grades. Some pieces were too small or irregular to sell as premium fuel. These pieces were perfect for insulation. What was waste material for one use became perfect material for another. Look for waste streams, understand their properties, find new applications. Fourth, simple solutions often beat complex solutions. Crushed charcoal poured into wall cavities. No binding agents, no processing, no complexity. Just charcoal filling space. The simplicity made installation easy, made maintenance unnecessary, made long-term performance guaranteed. Complex often fails, simple often succeeds. Fifth, extreme testing reveals truth. In mild weather, many insulation materials perform adequately. In minus 42-degree cold, differences become stark. Robert's sawdust, barely functional. Henrik's charcoal, extraordinarily effective. Test systems in extreme conditions to find their limits and true performance. Mild conditions hide deficiencies. Sixth, the best solutions often look strange initially. Filling walls with black charcoal looked absurd. Everyone mocked it. Everyone predicted failure. But it worked better than anything. If we judge by appearance or conventional wisdom, we reject good solutions. Judge by measured performance. Ignore appearance. Ignore convention. The 44-degree temperature difference between Henrik's cabin and Robert's cabin was transformative. Robert at 47 degrees was in constant danger. Hypothermia was a real risk. He couldn't function normally. He burned through his wood supply trying to stay barely alive. Henrik at 90 degrees was comfortable, actually had to moderate heating to avoid overheating. Slept peacefully, lived normally. Same climate, same cabin size, same stove, just different wall insulation. Charcoal versus sawdust. The difference was life versus death, comfort versus misery, thriving versus surviving. The economic analysis shows extraordinary value creation. Henrik spent $10 extra on construction for double walls to hold charcoal. The charcoal itself cost nothing since he produced it. He saved approximately 1.5 cords of wood per week compared to Robert. At 4 hours per cord, for cutting, splitting, and hauling, that's 6 hours per week. Over a 20-week winter, 120 hours saved. Over 35 years, 4,200 hours saved. At any reasonable value for time, the $10 investment paid back immediately. The total value created over 35 years was enormous. The social dynamics followed the now familiar pattern. Before winter, mockery. Everyone laughed at the charcoal walls, predicted Henrik would freeze, called him crazy. After winter, admiration. Everyone wanted charcoal insulation, wanted to learn from Henrik, recognized his understanding was superior. Innovation requires confidence to endure mockery until proof arrives. Henrik knew the properties of charcoal. He'd worked with it for years. He understood what it could do. He built according to knowledge, not convention. When extreme cold proved his approach, mockery became respect instantly. Henrik's charcoal wall represents brilliant application of material science, understanding structure at the cellular level, understanding thermal properties, understanding moisture dynamics, understanding durability. These insights let him identify charcoal as superior, insulation despite its categorization as fuel. The result was a thermal barrier far more effective than any commercial insulation available. The technology faded after the 1960s. Modern insulation materials became widely available. Fiberglass, foam boards, spray foam. These materials were convenient, standardized, acceptable to building inspectors, they became default choices. Charcoal insulation was forgotten by mainstream building, but the principle remained valid. The best modern insulation works the same way charcoal does: trapped air, cellular structure, low thermal conductivity. We've just found different ways to achieve the same structure. Charcoal did it naturally. Modern materials do it through manufacturing. The physics is identical. Henrik's charcoal wall made his cabin 44 degrees warmer all winter. It used 1/6 the wood. It provided comfort through the worst cold Montana could offer. It operated flawlessly for 35 years with zero maintenance. It proved that crushed charcoal was superior insulation to anything available commercially. Henrik was right. The mockers were wrong. And the difference was understanding. Understanding that charcoal was 85% air. Understanding that cellular structure creates perfect insulation. Understanding that moisture resistance matters. Understanding that simple often beats complex. Knowledge that Henrik gained through years of making charcoal. Knowledge that he applied to solve a heating problem. Knowledge that created a 44-degree comfort advantage. Everyone laughed at his charcoal wall. Black material stuffed where insulation should be, backwards thinking, crazy idea, waste of charcoal, until it made his cabin 44 degrees warmer, until it cut his wood consumption by 83%, until it proved that charcoal was revolutionary insulation. Then they stopped laughing and started buying charcoal. That's how forgotten solutions return. One unlikely application at a time. One dramatic result at a time. One converted skeptic at a time. Henrik's charcoal walls kept people warm for decades. Then the knowledge faded. Now we're remembering. The charcoal is still there in abandoned cabins if you know where to look. Black insulation that works better than anything modern. The best waste product ever repurposed. The smartest black wall ever built.